The night before the wedding, Ganga's soon-to-be husband called her to a hotel room, claiming there was an emergency he needed to discuss with her. Rushing to the hotel, Ganga was shocked when he locked the door from the inside. Staring at him in disbelief, she asked, "Suraj, what are you doing? What is all this?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. Suraj, however, burst into laughter and said, "You think too highly of yourself, don't you? You consider yourself a great woman, don't you? Well, today, I will break all your arrogance and crush your pride into dust. Because pride and arrogance suit only men, and if a woman tries to rise to a man's level, it is her man's duty to rein her in. That's why I want to control you before marriage itself." Saying this, Suraj suddenly lunged at Ganga, pushing her onto the bed. Ganga was utterly stunned. She had never expected such behavior from him. She said angrily, "Suraj, I am your fiancé. You will have all these rights tomorrow anyway. Then why are you doing this to me the night before our wedding?" As she pushed him away in anger, Suraj became infuriated. Grabbing her by the arms, he pulled her close. Like a delicate bird trapped in a predator's grasp, Ganga struggled to break free. Suraj smirked and said, "Ganga, you are going to be mine anyway. So what difference does it make if I celebrate our wedding night today or tomorrow?" Something wild had taken over Suraj. His emotions were beyond his control. Ganga's expression hardened with anger, and she snapped, "Suraj, you are mistaken if you think I will surrender myself to you before marriage. Yes, after the wedding, you will have certain rights over me, but before that, I will not even let you touch me." Saying this, she forcefully pulled her arm away and ran toward the door. But before she could reach it, Suraj quickly grabbed her again and threw her back onto the bed. Fear flickered in Ganga's eyes as she saw this monstrous sight of him. Holding her wrists tightly, Suraj sneered, "Ganga, you are not even worthy of my love. You never were. If you don't want me to take you by force, then surrender yourself willingly. Otherwise, I have no problem using force either. Ganga, you are my future wife, aren't you? And we are going to get married tomorrow anyway, and being your future husband, I have full rights over you." Ganga shook her head in no to Suraj's words. On hearing her no, Suraj's eyes turned red with anger, and he quickly moved forward and captured Ganga's lips in his lips, and then started drinking juice of her lips rapidly. Ganga's being started writhing on the bed, and she started saying, "Suraj, why are you doing this? Only 1 day is left with me in our marriage. After that, anyway, you have all the rights over me, and I also promise you that after tomorrow, you can do whatever you want to do. I will not even say anything." Saying this, Ganga was trying to free herself from Suraj, but in front of a strong young man like Suraj, Ganga, who was like a delicate bud, could not do anything. While opening the buttons of Ganga's shirt, Suraj's hands started traveling on her back, and despite trying her best, Ganga remained helpless in front of Suraj, lying on the bed like a living corpse. The very next moment, Suraj placed his lips on Ganga's waist. She kept them aside, and then her lips did such a thing that Ganga's screams were echoing in the whole room because Suraj's passion had overpowered Ganga, and the poor Ganga was left completely helpless. Ganga was sitting on the bed in her room and crying bitterly, and Ganga's eyes were swollen due to crying. Today, Ganga was wearing a maroon-colored lehenga, but along with the maroon lehenga, Ganga's face color had also turned from red to maroon due to excessive crying. Ganga felt as if the blood had frozen in her veins, and her breathing was also intermittent, because just a while ago, Ganga's honor, her self-respect, and her pride had been snatched away by a person who was Ganga's would-be husband, and he was also the protector of Ganga's honor. But today, that same protector had become a predator and played with Ganga's honor in such a way that Ganga fell face down on the ground. This act of breaking Ganga's self-respect and pride had broken Ganga from inside, and Ganga's dignity and respect was all ruined. Ganga's mother entered the room, and she was looking very beautiful because Ganga had got her the dress of her choice. Ganga was very excited about her wedding, and Ganga also had the same desires and feelings about her wedding that every girl has in her heart. But then, suddenly, Suraj's passion shattered all of Ganga's dreams. Life had played such a big joke with Ganga that she could not even tell anyone what had happened to her, and even if Ganga had told anyone, probably no one would have believed her words, and even if someone had believed her words, what difference would it have made, because Ganga was to get married to Suraj a day later. In fact, Ganga had already got married to Suraj 5 years ago when Ganga's father had died. Suraj was the son of Ganga's father's friend and Suraj's father, and Ganga's father were not the same. They were very close friends, as if the relationship between the two families was like a family. Ganga's parents had only 4 daughters, and God had not given them the happiness of a son, and Ganga was the eldest daughter of her parents. Ganga's father tried his best to give a good life to his daughters, and he never let his daughters feel the lack of anything. But when Ganga's father was fighting the battle of life and death on the hospital bed, he called his close friend Pratap, who was Suraj's father. At that time, Suraj was also present in the hospital with his father, and tears were not stopping from Ganga's eyes, because Ganga loved her father very much, and she was her father's most beloved daughter. Ganga's father put his hand on his friend's hand, and taking a promise from him, said, "Pratap, my friend, we have always loved each other's children like our own children, but now, after my departure, my daughters will be left completely alone. Promise me, my friend, that after my departure, you will never let my daughters be alone. Pratap, never let my daughters feel that there is no man in their house who can take care of them." Hearing this from Ganga's father, Suraj's father's eyes also filled with tears, because he loved his friend very much. They both were just friends in name, but their relationship was better than that of real brothers. Suraj's father always treated Ganga and her sisters as his own daughters, and till date he had never made any difference between Suraj and Ganga. Suraj's father said, "Alak, what are you saying? Have I ever considered your daughters as strangers? I ask for Ganga's hand in marriage for my son Suraj, and I also promise you that your daughters will always be under my protection, and I will never leave them alone." Hearing this from his friend, Ganga's father became so happy, as if a huge burden had been lifted from his chest. Ganga was surprised and looked at everyone's faces because she had never looked at Suraj in such a way, but the elders had decided, and Ganga's father did not have much time left, so he wanted to see his beloved daughter getting married in front of his eyes. All the arrangements were done within 2-3 hours, and Suraj married Ganga in a very simple way in the hospital room itself, by applying sindoor in Ganga's mang and putting a Mangal Sutra around her neck. And in this way, Ganga became Suraj's Balika Vadu. Even though Ganga had never thought of anything like this for Suraj, but at the same time, Ganga also knew that Suraj was a good boy, and he could also become a good life partner. Ganga did not have the courage to object in front of her father anyway, and then this was the wish of her beloved father. So Ganga also happily accepted this wish of her father from her heart. But Ganga's biggest mistake was that she never told Suraj that she too was ready for this relationship from her heart. On the contrary, whenever Suraj tried to talk to Ganga or go near her, Ganga would push Suraj away strictly, and seeing this strict attitude of Ganga, Suraj would immediately get angry and step back. Ganga's father left this world soon after Ganga's marriage, and after her father's death, Ganga had to fulfill the duties of being the eldest daughter of the house as well as a son. Ganga did not want anyone to raise a finger at her family's honor and dignity, or to think that fatherless daughters had become wayward. Even though Ganga was Suraj's child bride, whenever Suraj visited her house, she would lock herself in a room. She did not like him coming over like that because people would talk, and she was terrified of society's gossip. When your heart is pure, even the smallest remarks from the world can trouble you deeply, and this was exactly how Ganga felt. However, she had forgotten that she and Suraj shared a legitimate and sacred bond. Ganga did not want to show the slightest softness toward Suraj or give him any encouragement, because after all, he was a man and she was his wife. But her bidai, farewell to the groom's house, had not yet happened. In fact, she hadn't even taken the 7 sacred vows, Fairas, with him. In the hospital, Suraj had merely applied sindoor in her hair, parting, and tied a Mangal Sutra around her neck. After Ganga's father passed away, Suraj's father had assured Ganga's mother, "Ganga will remain with you as our responsibility. Since the children are still young, when they grow up, I will arrange a grand wedding and take Ganga to our home." This was exactly what Ganga feared. If she showed Suraj even the slightest warmth or simply smiled at him, he might take it the wrong way. She did not want to establish any relationship with him before her bidai. Suraj and Ganga studied at the same university. Suraj was pursuing an MBA, while Ganga was doing her master's in science. Despite being in the same university, she never once met him. Suraj had become a challenge for her. The more she tried to avoid him, the more he tried to get close to her. But Ganga did not want him to take even a single step toward her, fearing that their emotions might overpower them. After all, both of them were young and attractive, and Suraj had loved Ganga since childhood. Over time, even Ganga had developed feelings for him, which was natural for a married woman. However, she made the biggest mistake of her life by never expressing her love for Suraj. She feared society's judgment and could not bear the thought of anyone pointing fingers at her family. Ganga believed that an elder sister is a role model for her younger siblings, a guardian who shelters them under her wings. She did not want to set the wrong example by getting too close to Suraj in front of her younger sisters. Perhaps that's why she buried her emotions deep within her heart. 2 years had passed since their marriage, and during this time, Suraj had tried everything to break the wall of coldness Ganga had built around herself. But Ganga never let a single crack form in that wall. The price she paid for this came the night before her wedding ceremony, leaving her so broken that she could not even stand on her own feet. That night, for the first time, Ganga truly realized her mistake. Suraj had mistaken her indifference for hatred. He felt that Ganga saw him as a vile and despicable man, which was why she kept her distance from him. It is often said that a man's pride is unshakable, and it does not take long for that pride to turn into an obsession. Suraj's pride had transformed into an uncontrollable passion, and in that moment, he unleashed it upon Ganga in a way that not only shattered her dignity, but also tore apart her very soul. But Ganga knew the reason behind Suraj's cruelty, because just a week before their wedding, something had happened that made her the target of his anger. When Ganga and Suraj completed their master's degrees, both families started discussing their marriage. Over the past 5 years, Ganga had also developed deep feelings for Suraj, but she had never once confessed her love. Instead, whenever Suraj approached her, she would act indifferent and avoid him. Not once did she think about how her coldness might be affecting him. As their wedding day approached, Ganga began to experience all the emotions that arise in a young woman before her marriage. She was in love with Suraj, and she knew just how madly he loved her. Suraj had tried many times to express his feelings, but each time he held back, intimidated by Ganga's aloofness. On the other hand, Ganga's love for Suraj was so pure that she was afraid of even acknowledging it, fearing that her heart might rebel. She had 3 younger sisters to think about, and she had to protect their dignity as well. She didn't want anyone questioning her widowed mother's honor or bringing shame upon her family. That's why, for 4 years, she had kept her love hidden in her heart, never allowing anyone to see how deeply she loved Suraj. And now, after 5 long years of waiting, the day was finally approaching. As the wedding drew nearer, Ganga's restlessness and anticipation grew stronger. She had already decided that if Suraj was still upset with her on their wedding night, she would take the first step. Traditionally, it wasn't considered appropriate for a woman to make the first move, but after making Suraj suffer for 5 years, she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right between them. However, all of her plans were shattered a week before the wedding. That day, Ganga was getting ready with great excitement to go and pick out her bridal outfit with her mother and sisters. But just as she was combing her hair, Suraj suddenly entered the room without knocking. When Ganga turned around, she saw a strange, dazed look in his eyes, as if he wanted to say something to her. As Suraj slowly stepped closer, Ganga felt like he was losing himself in her beauty. He placed both hands on her shoulders and said, "Ganga, I need to tell you something. Before he could say anything further, Ganga interrupted him in her misunderstanding and said, I know what you want to say, Suraj. But this is not possible before marriage. You've waited 5 years. Can't you wait just 4 more days? There was a slight bitterness in her tone, and upon hearing it, Suraj's face turned red with anger. He snapped, Ganga, don't forget that I am your husband, and whatever I do with you is completely justified. Who are you to stop me? Perhaps Suraj had come with something else to say, but Ganga's harsh words changed his entire demeanor. The daze in his eyes was replaced with anger. Suraj's words stung Ganga deeply, and she clenched her fists in fury. But Suraj wasn't done yet. He grabbed her shoulders and shook her forcefully, saying, You think too highly of yourself, don't you? If I wanted, I could crush all your arrogance in just a minute. When a man's pride is wounded, he crosses all limits. So don't force me to be harsh with you. I've noticed that, ever since our wedding, you've been acting like... You ignore me as if I have some untouchable disease. I understand that there are still a few days left for our wedding, but before that, we can at least be friends, right? But it seems you didn't even consider me worthy of friendship. And now, I feel like maybe you are not even worthy of my love and affection. Saying this, Suraj grabbed both of Ganga's shoulders and shook her forcefully. Now even Ganga found it difficult to control herself. In response, she slapped Suraj hard across the face. And that was Ganga's biggest mistake, one that cost her dearly. Suraj punished her in a way that took away all the happiness from her life. Holding his cheek, Suraj glared at Ganga with burning eyes.